Hello everyone, this is week 4 of painting seasonal flowers, and this week I've decided to paint an open magnolia. My tree isn't looking great, but I have managed to get this one to open, and I have another one the same in front of me. They all seem to take on exactly the same shape from my tree. But as you see, when they're open, there isn't so much colour as on the outside of the petals that we painted last week. So I've thought that this might be a good opportunity to concentrate on some stronger shadows, something I think we all struggle with when painting flowers, especially pale ones. And also a good opportunity to work with a stronger and perhaps more interesting background. Another thing that some people find difficult, but really quite necessary when you're painting light flowers. So these are the two techniques that I'd like you to try and concentrate on this week. It may mean coming out of your comfort zone, but do try, as this is the way forward. You know, these are all techniques that you really need to know and learn. So let's see how that goes. These are the colours that I've decided to use for my open magnolia. So you can zoom in on those and use the same, or decide for yourself what you would like to use. As you can see, I have masked off just the very centre of the stamens and the calyx. I hope you can see that. Here it is. I didn't draw it, I just did the drawing with my drawing tool and the masking fluid. So hopefully that'll come together nicely when I come to paint over the top, but I'll leave that until last. But obviously you must allow that to dry before you get painting. For those who are new, it's a rubber solution that you paint over to reserve any light colours that you may need in the centre or anywhere in your work. Because when you paint over, it reserves the shapes that you require. And then obviously you have to rub that off when your paint is dry. Right, so I'm working wet on wet, and I've mixed together for the paler petals a mixture of cobalt violet and cobalt blue, because actually, although they may look white when they're on the tree and looking at them from a distance, they're actually not particularly white or light. They are light but not white, and in some places they can get quite deep in shadow. So this is what I'm going to actually try to achieve this time. So I'm just putting down, I've got one petal in front of another here, which is another good thing for us to try to achieve, so that we get perspective in our work. There's also a folded area at the top of this particular petal that I want to leave as a separate section to paint in a bit. But while it's still wet, it's a little bit too wet for me to put the shadows on at the moment, but I can actually at the base here, where it gets very strong in colour, just drop that colour in. I'm using quite a large brush. My brushes seem to look smaller on the videos than they actually are when I'm using them, I've noticed. But it is a Series 33-8, which is actually quite a large brush. May get a bigger one out. So while I'm waiting for that one just to stop puddling and shining, because I want the shadow not to flood everywhere. And if I'm using too much water, then it's actually going to flood everywhere. And I want to keep a certain amount of control to keep my lights and darks, but I'm trying to keep the edges of my petals light paper, leaving white paper, because I'm going to start putting a background on as well fairly soon, and I want it to show up light at the edges, so I'm not painting right to the edge of my drawing. I've only got a very light drawing here, but it's giving me a guide as to where I want to go. Again, it's deeper just in here, so I can put that in now, and that's Permanent Rose with a little bit of quinacridone magenta on the top. And letting that float nicely in the water, which leaves a nice soft edge. Right, I'm going to go back over there now. As you see, I'm holding my brush very loosely again, not too close to the point, so that I don't get too much definition and detail. So this is going to be, because it's got this other petal in front of it, it's going to have quite a lot of shadow. So I've got that same mix, the cobalt, violet and blue, but made stronger for the shadows, and therefore keeping the shadows pretty. If we're going to go strong with the shadows, I think we need to try to keep them nice and pretty. Try to avoid strong greys. A nice pale grey would be fine, but just be careful about mixing your greys. But I'm sort of edging towards a sort of purpley blue for my shadows today. It's a nice light area there, which I'm keeping. I'm going to try and reserve that. And very soon I'm going to start pushing in the background. Not minding too much if one colour, it's not going to be particularly loose, but it isn't going to be particularly detailed either. It's somewhere between the two. So I'm not worrying too much if one colour floats into the next. What I really want to concentrate on is getting some nice strong shadows going on. Right, let's try this one. I'm still using this enormous palette, which is fine for what I'm doing, demonstrating, but I think that's all I'll be using it for. Right, so there's a lot of shadow here, I can see. Soften this edge away. Maybe getting bluer here. Remember that it will dry up 3 times lighter than when I apply it, this paint. I'm not going to put heavy shadow in all of the petals. But I want you to see that you can paint a white flower, but at the same time putting a lot of shadow in, which in fact I'm seeing. I don't know if you're seeing a lot of shadow in that one there. There's a bit more light coming onto that one than there is the one I've got in front of me, I think. Right. So at this point I'm going to start putting a bit of background in. And I've got a nice dark green mix of cadmium yellow and Payne's grey, so I'm being really brave here. And I'm going to use my sword brush. You can use a flat brush, you can use a round brush, you can use your sword brush, but this is the dagger brush, which has a sort of flatter edge, one side, still got a really good point, but I want to try and create nice shapes. I think you've seen me do this before. I want to create some nice shapes into the background, and this brush will actually enable me to do that more easily than a round brush would. Right, so nice and dark in here. This is a good place to get dark. It's a bit awkward working over myself like this. So really dark in here, and letting that colour float in the water. It won't go past the water edge that I've laid down. If it does, doesn't really matter. If it goes into the petals, then part of the flower becomes part of the background as well, which I like. But as you can see, this brush is creating nice shapes into this background that I'm laying down. So I'm just letting that happen. And I can paint more over the top of that if I feel I need to. But it's going to look quite natural and nice, hopefully, as it dries. And I'm not really going to see exactly what I've done until it does dry. So let's bring this down here as well. Nice clean water being laid down first. So I'll be getting some hard edges and some soft edges. Where the paper is dry, it'll be a softer edge. Where the paper is wet, it'll just blend into the paper and create a soft edge, which is going to look hopefully interesting in my background. But twist and turn the brushes around just to create nice natural looking shapes that might be foliage or branches and various shapes and things going on behind this magnolia. If you haven't done this before, maybe have a practice on another sheet first, or just go for it, and if you have to paint it again, fine, but you will learn from it. Right, okay. So I've created quite a shapely little background there so far. So a bit more shadow, I think, in here now. Now that this is dried, a bit more. The darker my shadow, the lighter the light areas within my petal will become. It's all very wet. That's now going to creep in there, but that's fine, I like it. Good. Same thing happening there. Don't get scared when things like this happen. Just leave it to dry and you'll be surprised at how much nicer it looks when it is dry. I'm going to leave that edge and I'm going to leave this petal and paint that in a minute. Right, I'll go down to this one here. I may have to stop at some point and sort of catch up with myself and then start again. But this has got a lot of shadow in it as well. This side is going to be more shadowed, I think, and then it's going to get the top petals, the horizontal petals, are going to get a lot lighter. Again, I've got one petal overlapping another here. So this is another thing that you'll probably find with painting one of these this week, that you will have to do some overlapping, which is another good thing to learn and to practice. It doesn't look very natural when you just have no overlapping with various flowers or petals, so you've got to learn to do that. At least they've got a little bit of colour going on towards the centre of these flowers. Otherwise, when they're open, they're just not very colourful at all, really. A lot of shadow here. So while that's still damp, letting that blend in and away. That's just pure cobalt going on there now. But mingled with the colour underneath, it's becoming purple. Right, I'm going to stop and then carry on with the petals that are underneath so that I can then work on the top petals when it's dry and you can see what I do. Okay, now I want to keep, I've got 3 petals here that are overlapping and sitting on top of the ones that are more in shadow. So I want to keep those as light as I can, but at the same time I've got to give them some shape and some form and a certain amount of detail. So I've weakened my mix even further, and I'm going to try and leave some white paper. Change to a brush that's got a really sharp point so that I can deal with all the little crevices that I'll find towards the centre of the flower. It's really dark in here, so I'm adding a little bit of the blue to the quinacridone magenta. Right. Touch of pink as well. There's another fold there. These are all about the folds when they're open. There are a few folds and they all seem to take on each petal. Each flower seems to have the same shaped petals, obviously, everywhere. And when they open up, they take on this same fascinating shape. Right, a little bit of depth under here where this fold is. Made that quite strong so that it stands away from the petal underneath. So it isn't always a matter of painting exactly what you see, but knowing what is going to work best. I'll bring some of that blue the other side as well. Now I hope that's got some shape to it, and I hope you can see it sitting in front of the ones behind. And they all have a little sort of central It's not a vein exactly, but a marking that gives them their character. Right, I'll leave that one for now. Another one doing curly things here. Lots of shadow behind that fold, so go stronger with that. I was thinking that you may not all be able to get hold of a magnolia, so there are different options, because I would like you to paint something like this. You could, tulips are easy to get hold of at the moment, so you could get hold of a white tulip and allow it to open right up, and it will create, I think they have about 5 or 6 petals. So when they're open, it would create a nice shape for you, and you could maybe try painting a white tulip in this way. Failing that, there are hundreds of magnolias on pixabay.com, which I'm saying this for the sake of the new people. You can download anything from Pixabay without breaching copyright or have any charges at all. They're free. So hundreds on there. You could, it's not my favourite thing, but I think sometimes we're just going to have to go with photographs at the moment because we can't get what we need. So you could download something like that, or you can copy the shape of mine without breaching copyright, if you've got my permission, which you have. Right, so that's another little folded one there, and I've tried to keep that quite light. Hopefully it'll show up at the edges here more when I do a bit more background. But there's always a lot of shadow right at the very sort of edge there. Good. Right, one more, and then I'll have to do a bit more of that background. I meant to work on the background when they were wet, but they were the ones I didn't mind losing, so this is fine. It's nice to allow some of your petals to float into the background here and there, because then the flower becomes part of the background as well, which always looks really pretty and not standing out alone. Just easier for people the viewer to look at. Quite fun to paint. So always paint in the direction that you see the markings on these petals. Some of the pink is actually creeping over the edge of my flowers here. So that's the quinacridone magenta again. So I'm sort of being more careful here because of trying to get this little bit of detail going on. But again, nice to allow the colour to move around in the water, if you can. And there's that marking again. Softened it a bit. Quite a lot of blue here. Nice little bit of shadow that side. And then again it's got this fold back. Trying to keep this side lighter and not so strong with the shadows. Some of them, well, as you see, have quite a lot of the brown markings on, but I'm not going to go with that. I sometimes do, and have with one that I did earlier, but I'm not going to with this one. Right, so now I'm going to do a bit more with my sword brush, dagger brush, and quickly pop some background in. I may have to stop again because there's quite a long way to go with it, and I actually want some of it to dry so that I can show you the way I paint over the top of my background to get different shapes. Don't be afraid to leave white paper in your backgrounds as well. That always looks nice and natural. And bringing a warmer colour in there. So the background is lovely to play around with in this way. So I hope you will try for this. If you don't want to use my suggested colours, you can make up your own. Do some practice pieces first to see what you like. The biggest tip with anything when you're painting wet in the way that I am, allow it to dry before you judge. Do I say that every week? Sorry. Important though. So I can start getting darker again soon as I'm coming back round this side. I'm trying to create variation here. Light side, dark side, white paper. You can indicate a stalk if you feel it necessary. And I mustn't forget that I have to finish off the centre, but I wanted to do that once the paint is completely dry. It does allow you to keep quite a bit of control using this brush, because you can twist it so that you can use the pointy end and get little details in and work into little corners and crevices. Really dark under here. It's lovely seeing the different shapes appearing. If you haven't done this before, a good idea might be just to draw a shape of a flower without putting all the paint and working on it for ages before putting the background in, and then just practicing this background situation, seeing how you get on before putting it into your masterpiece. Right, I'm going to stop and let this dry because I want to put more work into the background and work on the centre. Right, I think it's dry now, so, and I have actually painted the centre because I want to just show what it looks like. I think that's dry enough. When this comes off, sometimes you have to touch up after taking this off. So let's see. Yeah, I think it needs to have a little bit more colour going on over the top of these little light areas that I've left here. Still going to show up, that didn't all come off, so be careful that you get all that off. And that's alizarin crimson in the centre there, because in fact it was a deeper sort of red. And then with the tip of a brush you can just bring the shape back into the centre here, working around, but I'd leave those quite light, those little tips of the stamens there, but just put a bit of depth through the centre where it gets stronger. Right, okay, so that bit's done. The background has dried up and you can now see some of the marks that I've made already quickly with my brush as I went around, but you can now go in and make more if you wish over the top now that it's dry, just to, you know, just to create some more interest, either leaf shapes or stalk shapes. You can use another colour, putting in some interest, make it look like more branches, stalks, other things going on. But it must dry first, otherwise you're going to blend anything that you do on the top. It's nice there, it's already made, the watercolour has made nice marks for me there already. So if you were to actually paint some blossom with this or something like that, you could then go back and put some more of these nice marks in, keeping it darker one side than the other perhaps, as I have done. Putting water on the top always creates quite a nice end result, something you don't really see until it's dry. So have a try. So that's a bit hurried, but I think you get the idea of the technique. I couldn't find I didn't do it to size, I couldn't really find one that fits, but you could maybe do something like that. That looks all right. Not everything has to be in the picture, so maybe that works. Anyway, that one's done. One or two other little ideas. I did a smaller one with my worked over the top background, so you could always go for a smaller shape, and that was just to really try out my colours, but you could do that. And this one I'll show you because I worked quite a long time on the background on this one. I know it's not a magnolia, but it's a tree orchid, which is a similar sort of shape, but it's the background I wanted you to see. It's actually this way up. So you could actually put a bit of salt in the background if you wanted to, but these are the sort of markings that you're going to get when it's dry, and I quite like it when you've got quite a plain flower in the centre. This one is a Magnolia, and just giving the idea of what mine look like at the moment, all sort of shabby and marked and not looking great. But you know, if you're a loose painter and you want to paint loosely, then that's an idea for you. Okay, so I think that's it for this week. I said about getting a tulip, didn't I, if you can't get hold of a Magnolia, or looking on Pixabay. Next week I hope to stay with flowers, depending on what I can find and what's in my garden, but I thought I'd introduce some pen and ink as well next week. So I may find some small flowers that I would find easier to paint with and draw with pen. So let's see what happens there. For the new people, I just want to say that I can send you art materials if you need them, or I can mount with things like this and or frame your pictures for you. Okay, so think about shadows this week, think about backgrounds, and let everything dry before you judge. Okay, this is what I've been working with. All things not great. Okay, take care, have a good week, bye bye.